Thank you to all the members for supporting my channel. Hello there. Let me make one thing clear at the very beginning of this video. This video is not made for me. I can easily clear the spiral abyss with my brain turned off. This abyss was so much harder than the last abyss, I almost had to open my eyes. And the same probably goes for you too, because in all likelihood, you watching me, a new content creator that hasn't even been uploading for 3 weeks and has less than 3k subs, very highly likely that you are more invested in the community to even find my channel, let alone find this specific video. So just know that the spiral abyss might be easy for you, okay? It's easy for me, but we're not talking about me and you. We're talking about the vast majority of the community in today's video. With that all being said, the new spiral abyss is horseshit and has a problematic standard that it's setting up that I've talked about before, but I feel like I need to talk about it again because it's finally coming to fruition. I have talked about the spiral abyss in Genshin Impact for a very long time because it is one of my most favorite things to do in Genshin, because there is quite frankly nowhere else to really efficiently test out proper team comps. No, Imaginarium Theater does not count because you cannot bring in the exact team you want on the actual difficult floors. It's damn near impossible, which only leaves the Spiral Abyss as my mainstay for getting background footage for content, testing out new team comps, and discovering how powerful units are. So needless to say, I play Spiral Abyss a lot. Spiral Abyss is so easy for me at this point, I can basically do it with my eyes closed. And when you put as much time as I do into something like the Abyss, you start to really care about its balancing. And with that all being said, I'm going to just point out the obvious. The Spiral Abyss requires maybe about 5% skill, and then about 95% RNG luck in the characters you bring in, and that's the god honest truth. And this last Spiral Abyss is the embodiment of all of the worst things you can do to arbitrarily increase game difficulty, because it follows the criteria of everything I just said. It's not a skill check, it's a character stat and DPS check. It's no secret that as time goes on, the HP in Spiral Abyss increases, and that is to be expected. And if you deny that, I would just want to point something out that I always like to point out. A normal, standard enemy in floor 10 of the Spiral Abyss, on average, has more HP than Dvalin. You know, the world boss. And little Mr. Eremite Hunter over there has more HP than that. And that is a normal enemy on floor 10. But that's to be expected, because these new characters are a lot stronger than Dvalin because they came out multiple years later. Yes, but Genshin has this problem where it has no mechanical difficulty. Think about it for a second. Who is the most popular sustain in the Spiral Abyss? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. It's Zhongli. Zhongli is the most popular sustain in the Spiral Abyss. And he's popular because he makes it so that you can ignore enemy mechanics. But you don't even need Zhongli to do that. Any decently built healer from any point in Genshin's meta is more than powerful enough to keep you so stocked up on health, you never have to worry about accidentally beefing it and dying unless you play especially like shit or you play on mobile. This means that no matter how many times a new enemy comes out in Genshin, and no matter how many cool new mechanics they get, it does not fucking matter. Because at the end of the day, you can just pop on your shield or use your healing magic and completely ignore the mechanic. You can take as many hits as you want and it does not matter. So how do we bypass this mechanic? Players are able to constantly heal back all of their HP. So let's just make an enemy that just fucking one-shots them. Isn't that awesome? This is where enemies with Bond of Life mechanics, Consecrated Beast, and some sort of reactionary damage comes into play. Enemies with annoying mechanics that hard lock off your ability to actually play the game is one of my least favorite things in video games in general. Bond of Life prevents healing unless you heal the HP back, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but these enemies get really powerful attacks that can easily nuke you if you don't get the health back within a certain period of time. So if you're burst on cooldown, that's an insta kill. Consecrated Beast apply elements, which in general is not that big of a problem, but when there's more than one of them on field and two of them hit you back to back, that's basically instant death and there's nothing you can do about it. God forbid you run a character that applies an element to you normally like Bennett, because then you're really in for some fucking hurt. And then there's enemies like Abyss Lectors that give themselves really powerful shields, which in theory can be broken by any character, but you're not doing it quickly enough to get full stars without bringing in the element that either A, breaks it, or stacking a bunch of Geo Aura to eventually shatter it. These these enemies alone are not difficult to deal with. They just lock you into a win-lose mechanic where you either have the thing you need to win, or you don't, and you lose. And while it's true that every player in the game does have some character that has some capacity to deal with this, there are very clearly superior options that most players won't have access to. But I don't mind annoying mechanics if the enemy health pool isn't bloated, which, as of recent Spiral Abysses, has become the norm. Let me hit you with some numbers real quick. In the version 2.0 Spiral Abyss, we had to fight Mabu Kenki as a boss enemy near the end of the rotation, and he, at the time, was considered one of the more difficult enemies in Genshin's history. He had about 900,000 HP. As of last Abyss version 5.0, we received Mabu Kenki again on floor 12-2 of the Spiral Abyss. He didn't have anywhere near the reverence that he had back then. God! Because a lot of players have learned how to fight Mabu Kenki. So how do they compensate? Give him 1.5 million HP. Oh, well, you'd say, oh, that's not that big of an increase, you know, that's not that much. And then you realize that he's wave 2. Because of course he is. Not only does he have almost 50% more HP than he had on his initial debut, he's also not even the only thing you have to fight anymore. You now also have to fight a Husk Guard with 960,000 HP on top of him. So that means you're dealing with about 2.4 million HP on Chamber 12-2 of the Spiral Abyss. That doesn't count the first half, because the first half adds another 2.8 million HP on top of it, meaning we're dealing with 5.2 million HP. What a world we live in. That was not even a week ago, and I want to go back, because the most recent Spiral Abyss combines both of these annoying-ass mechanics into one delicious treat. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Abyss has a special Abyss modifier that increases the HP of the enemies within them. So that's why a lot of enemies that you would normally see in the overworld, bosses and such, seem like they're a lot weaker than they are than their Abyss counterparts. I call it the Abyss buff. It doesn't really have a name. It's not stated anywhere in the main game itself, but if you dig into the game files, you will see that this Abyss buff is 150%. And that checks out, just about. Well, this most recent Spiral Abyss, for the first time in Genshin's history, increased the HP modifier in the Spiral Abyss. So now, instead of it being 150%, we are now dealing with a 275% health bonus. That is almost double. And let me tell you, it is very, very, very noticeable. I don't know how many of you have done the most recent Abyss by now. I don't know how many of you are like in-game players, but I'm sure a number of you playing Last Abyss took a moment while you were playing and thought to yourself, damn, why do these things feel so fucking tanky? Especially because Last Abyss, I went in with my Kanich and was one-shotting every single elite enemy, and yet this enemy, I was having to do a full rotation. That seems weird, right? Well, about that, this floor 12 Spiral Abyss, because of course it does, has another hidden modifier that increases the HP pools by a further 50%. Let me put that in perspective. In the data mined patch files for the version 5.1 Spiral Abyss, the Consecrated Beast on floor 1 were only supposed to have 490,000 HP, which seems right, because last Spiral Abyss, where we had to deal with the Fatui and the Nagahiba, they all together had a little bit over 2 million HP. And this Spiral Abyss, after the HP modifier was added 150%, that would have roughly equated to the same thing. Well, this time, as of the current Spiral Abyss, I can't give you an exact number because we haven't gotten it yet, but I can tell you with my whole chest that it is over 1 million HP on floor 12-1. And I know this because I did a full Kanich rotation on one of them and it wasn't dead yet. And there are two of them, by the way, which means the HP pool on just one side of the Abyss this rotation is higher than it was last rotation. But it gets better than that, because there is a new enemy called the Golem of Clay and Marble, or I think that's his name. He's the horse, the big ass horse. Last Spiral Abyss, we had to fight the Mountain King and the Perpetual Mechanical Array. The Mountain King had 2,994,841 HP, and the Perpetual Mechanical Array had 2,218,401 HP. Put together, that's roughly 5.1 million health, which is altogether not that impressive. This time, just the Golem, just the horse. Oh, you know, it's not that much, just 7 million. But wait, there's more, because this most recent Abyss wants to push Geo, and like I've said 100 times, Geo as a DPS element is kind of dog shit. We got Zillion recently, and don't get me wrong, Zillion's good, and we have Zhongli, and we have Navia, but other than that, the element is pretty lackluster, and that's coming from an R1, C1 Edo main, okay? If you do not bring Geo against this enemy to break his shield, he has 80% damage res. That means that in practice, if you cannot shatter this boss's shield, he has effectively 12 million health points before you can take him down. It took me a full minute and 45 seconds of blasting him with my new Valette build, who has signature weapon, with Zillion, with Kazuha, and Farina C6, to finally put the motherfucker down, which means you need to play around the Geo mechanic. But if you don't have a good Geo character, you're kind of fucked, and I'm sure some of you would be like, oh, bring in Noelle, oh, bring in Zillion. Noelle isn't powerful enough to be your main carry, meaning you're losing DPS that way, or you could bring in Zillion, but Zillion doesn't break quick enough either, because I brought her in too. It's just not enough, meaning you have to bring in a full Geo team, and this is your reminder, Geo teams haven't fucking run in a long time, aside from Chihori and Zillion. So you have two options, essentially. You either need to bring in Overload, you need to bring in a Navia hyper carry, or some kind of Geo side grade onto the team, like Zhongli and maybe another Geo buffer, to maybe break the shield. And there's more than one enemy that does that this Abyss anyway. Otherwise, your only choice is to Caveman Ooga Booga smash your head against the wall with sheer brute force until it gives and breaks away. And while I could have easily brought in Mono Geo and maybe done full damage that way, me personally, I like seeing if it's possible to beat Spiral Abyss without giving to the mechanics, and 9 times out of 10 it is possible, but you also need to remember that I have 4 years of fucking investment on my account and a ridiculous amount of 5 stars and 5-star weapons, so I'm not really a realistic scenario. And even when you do eventually win, it's not really that satisfying, because I know I didn't win because it was this impossible challenge that I overcame. I only won because I had the characters it wanted me to have, and that's boring. This shit is the pinnacle of artificial difficulty. I made a video talking about this all the way back in the 3.5 Spiral Abyss when the Consecrated Beasts were first added, and I only get proven more and more right as Abysses move on. One way or another, I'm going to clear the Spiral Abyss. However, it's really demoralizing to players who are new to the game or players who are finally clearing consistently to get roadblocked like this by some bullshit abyss that isn't even that challenging. It's not like you're overcoming this insane obstacle, all you're doing is building up enough stat numbers and bringing in the right characters to win, and that's boring. But I don't know. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. See ya.